same time. So start with Brian. Brian, how are you tonight?
I'm doing all right.
Wonderful. Will, yourself?
Awesome. I can't wait. Excited for this.
Sweet. So just before we get started, the topic tonight is the angel of the Lord. I'm sure some of you can read the captions, so you understand that. So Brother Brian is going to take the affirmative case in tonight's debate, this afternoon's debate. That's going to ruin me all day. And he is taking essentially the position that the angel of the Lord is Yod He and Vav He, God. It is actually him. And Will be taking the negative to that position. I'm going to let them give a chance to, of course, they're going to have their opening statements. And while we're here, I'm going to give the crowd just a little bit of an introduction of what to expect from tonight. So we're going to have 10-minute introduction opening statements from each. Brian will go first as he has the affirmative position. Then there will be cross-examination for 3 questions from each side. Each will be granted 5 minutes per question. Then there will be an open discussion phase after that for about 30 minutes. This will be a little bit more relaxed where they can kind of talk to each other rather than deal with the rigid structure of a debate. And so they can kind of have more of a discussion. Then there will be a crowdsourced 20-minute Q&A. So for those of you in the comments, if you have any questions at all for any of our debaters, please put to who your question is directed at and ask your question, and you may get selected to go ahead and be featured for a question. So Brian and Will both have a chance to answer some questions from the crowd, and then we will close out today with a 10-minute closing statement. So that's the overall layout for tonight. It should run to about 90 minutes to an hour or 2 hours, give or take. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm projecting that it should be fun either way. 2 hours will go by fast. And oftentimes I find that 2 hours is not long enough for a debate, but here we are. So, all right. So first and foremost, I'm going to give our competitors a chance to introduce themselves just a little bit before we get started. And then we will once again clear the rules and then we'll get started. So Brian, you're up first for your introduction. If you don't mind, tell the world a little bit about yourself.
And how long is this? Is just greeting everybody?
Yeah, this is just an introduction. Say, hi, I'm Brian. I went here for school. Whatever you want to say for an introduction.
Okay. I'm Brother Brian, and I'm here at the affirmative position that the angel of the Lord is Yahweh, and I got some scriptures to prove it, and even some of the scholars to even back up my claims. But God bless everybody. Appreciate the invite, and Will is going to enjoy this debate because we're going to be pretty cordial about it because I think me and Will, we get along pretty good. We don't like fuss at each other too much. But God bless everybody.
Wonderful. And Will, tell the world a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction.
Hey guys, my name is Will Walkie. You can see me on YouTube, TikTok, anything like that. Married, 2 wonderful kids. I have Elijah, my firstborn, and then Solomia, my second. I'm a plumber, got to stick up for those blue collar trades. I'm a Torah observant Christian, so do my best to do that and follow my master Yeshua.
Wonderful. Perfect. Easy day, both of you. All right. So real quick, just a reminder, you have 10-minute opening statements. If the whole crowd and our competitors look up at the top right of the screen, they will see a blank timer. That timer will contain a 10-minute timer, so each of you can have an idea of where you are in your 10-minute openings, but you can use the full 10 minutes or you can use 30 seconds and yield your time. It's whatever you want to do, as well as you will be given 2-minute warnings and 1-minute warnings on the banners below, just so that everyone's tracking as well as the crowd is tracking. So that being said, let's go ahead and get this party started. So I'm going to go ahead and bring, since Brother Brian is in the affirmative position, I'm going to go ahead and bring him into the spotlight here. You'll notice that this side of the screen is red, right? So that's the hot seat, and we're in the blue section, right? So we're cooling off. We're just chilling over here. So now I'm going to put Brian in the hot seat, and sir, you may begin your 10-minute opening statements. As soon as you begin talking, I will start the timer. So just on your time.
All right. The first thing I'm going to bring up is we're talking about who is the angel of the Lord. First thing, we got to define our terms. When it comes to the angel, The word angel is simply translated into English of the Greek angelos, which is used in the Septuagint LAX, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and in the Greek New Testament. The word that is used in Hebrew is malek. The lexical sources anonymous that the Hebrew word malak in its origin, signification, and it is used in the Bible to mean one sent a messenger, and that's Brown Driggs, all right, etc. As such, it refers to function rather than the nature of an angel, and it could just as well refer to the one who is divine or human rather than supernatural being as the word angel is normally understood. In other words, the nature of the agent is something that can't be determined by the word alone and has to be determined by other factors according after discussing the etymology of the word. And the root idea malik, then one sent messenger or ember. Only in context determine the take on specifically. So let's get an example. Let's go to Genesis 16, verse 7. We'll start there. And it says, the angel of the Lord found her by the spring of the water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? She says, I'm fleeing from my master. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, surely I will multiply your offspring so that you cannot be numbered in multitude. Behold, you're pregnant and bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone hand against him. And he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. And here's the key right here. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. For she said, truly, here I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore, well, I shall call it Ber Lara. It means Kadesh and Bered. All right, we go to the next one, next sense, and also Genesis 21. This is also Hagar. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of the Lord called Hagar, and from heaven said, what is your trouble, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy, and lift up the boy and hold him fast in your hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes and saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin. And God was with the boy, and he grew up and lived in the wilderness praying. All right, then we go to the next one that we see in Genesis 22. This is Abraham's incident, and we'll start at verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord called him from heaven, said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy and do anything, for now I know that you fear God. You have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket. And Abraham went to took the ram and offered up as a burnt offering instead of the son. So the Abraham called the name of the place, the Lord will provide. As it is today, on the mount of Lord, it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars in heaven and as the sand of the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of your enemies. And in your offspring and all the nations of the earth shall be, because you have obeyed my voice. And notice the angel of the Lord was speaking there. All right, let's go to Genesis 31. This time, the angel of God said in a dream, Jacob, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the goats that mate with the flock and striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you, and I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. Genesis 22. Notice what he says. This is where Jacob wrestled with this man. And you find out later it would be the angel of the Lord. The same night, he arose and took his 2 wives and his female servant and 11 children and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was out of the joint, and he wrestled with him. Then he let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. Then he said, your name no longer will be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked, please tell me your name. But he says, why is that you ask my name? And there he blessed him, and Jacob called the name of the blessed place Peniel, for saying, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is delivered. All right, now we scroll over here to Genesis 48, and this is where Jacob is blessing the 12 tribes. And it says, the God before whom my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all the evil of the boys. All right, then we go to Hosea 12. Watch in Hosea 12, it says the Lord has indicted against Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways. He will repay him according to his deeds. In the womb he took by his heel, and in manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel and prevailed and wept and sought his favor. He met God at Bethel, and there God spoke with us. The Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial name. So you, by the help of your God, return. Hold fast to the love and justice and wait continually for your God. Then we'll go over here to we'll go to Exodus 3, where the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses. Now Moses was keeping the flock, the father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flame in the midst of the bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, and yet it was not consumed. And Moses says, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush. Moses, Moses, here I am. Then he said, do not come near. Take off your sandals, your feet, for this place is standing on holy ground, which is only used for God when it talks about being holy. And he says, I am God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, tracing back the angel to Abraham. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. All right, now we go to Judges 2. And notice in Judges 2, now the angel of the Lord came up to Gilgal by Shem, and he says, I brought you up out of Egypt and led you in the land, which I have sworn to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant. We know the covenant started with Abraham, with you and for you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land, and you will tear down the altars, but you have not obeyed me. What is this you have done? Therefore I will not drive them out before you, but they will become as thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a snare to you. When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to the sons of Israel, the people lifted up their voice and wept. Let me see how much time I got left.
20 seconds.
Okay. How much?
15 seconds now.
Okay. All right. I yield.
All right. Very well. All right, so we're coming out the gate hot. We got a lot of scripture to work through, and thank you very much for your opening statement. Wonderful job. Thank you for staying within time as well. Okay, Will, you're next. You ready to take the hot seat? Let me go ahead and unmute you here. Boom. All right, I will begin the timer when you begin talking.
So first off, I want to thank Alternate Media for hosting this debate and to Seamus for moderating it. So the topic today is, who is the angel of the Lord? Even though today most churches hold the position that the angel of the Lord is either Yeshua, Jesus, or God himself, I differ on the stance. I hold a position based on evidence through the scriptures that it was either an angelic presence or a literal human. We see many examples in the Bible that the angel of the Lord is an entity who does the Father's will. It's important to note that the phrase angel of the Lord in the Hebrew literally means messenger of the Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh. And this is important because the translation from Hebrew to English can be misleading for taking out the word messenger and replacing it with an angel. Angels, as most Western people will recognize, is a divine spirit creature serving God. But we also see it refer to humans, as we see in 2 Kings 6:33, Haggai 1:13, and Malachi chapter 2, verse 7, and chapter 3, verse 1, just to name a few. My opponent, however, is going to focus on the actions and titles from the angel of the Lord. There are common misunderstandings that the church uses to push their agenda on the scriptures. And in this opening, we're going to look at the three most popular, and throughout the debate, we'll discuss more on these. So the first one, and probably most popular, is the account recorded in Genesis 32, verse 24 to 30, where it is recorded that Jacob wrestles with God. Towards the end of that account, Jacob says, I have seen God, yet my life was preserved. However, given acknowledgement that no one can see God's face and live, as it says in Exodus 33:20, there must be more to this account. In the book of Hosea 12, 3 and 4, it retells the same account. However, it says that Jacob wrestled with an angel or messenger instead of using the Hebrew word for God, Elohim. So when Hosea retells a story from Genesis, he uses the term messenger because it is understood even back then that it was literally not God himself, but as an agent or representative of him. Next verse we're going to look at is Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. This is where Moses is talking to the burning bush, where the text says specifically that the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in the burning bush. And as the conversation between the angel and Moses continue in verse 4, it is given the title of God, and that Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh is talking to Moses. This example can be explained by if your friend is telling you to write a letter for him. Even though you are literally writing down the words, your friend is telling you what to write down. So it might be in your handwriting, but they are your friend's words. And we see this as the same example that the angel of the Lord is delivering a message, and the message is from God himself. So he is figuratively God, but not literally. The third and final verse I'm going to bring up is Exodus chapter 19, verse 3. This verse talks about Moses going up to Mount Sinai to meet with the one true God. And again, most churches will use this as the literal sense. But even centuries later, as we look at the book of Acts, especially chapter 7, verse 30 and 38, it talks about Moses going up to speak to the angel of the Lord. So even Luke, the author of Acts, with all the Jews, even up to the time after Yeshua, always understood that it was literally not God himself, but a messenger who was an agent of God. Now, the concept of agency is never talked about in churches because the idea was abandoned during all the councils centuries after the first disciples. Agency has always been understood as either a literal angel or a human that comes in the name of Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh. I'll give two examples of agency to help show and give a better understanding of how it works. In Exodus 7:17 to 18, it says that Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh will hold the staff in his hand and that he will strike the river. However, going into verse 19, God tells Moses to tell Aaron to hold the staff in his hand and to strike the river. God is making the declaration according to his will that he will do these things, yet he sends out Moses to have Aaron literally do them. We can all agree here that Aaron is not Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh, but he is acting as the agent of him. Another example we see, and shout out to Courtney Smith for this, is Isaiah chapter 7, verse 3, where God is telling Isaiah to go to and talk to King Ahaz. However, in verse 10, we see that Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh is talking to Ahaz. Just as Numbers 23:19 brings out that God is not a man, we can all agree Aaron and Isaiah are not literally Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh, but are doing his divine will in his name. This again alludes to the example I gave earlier about someone writing down the words of another. This is the same concept. Even from an angelic standpoint, we know that God cannot be that. Again, my opponent is going to argue that the angel of the Lord is either Yeshua or God from the Old Testament. And again, Through the understanding of agency, we know that many individuals can be called Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh, and this is the same for King, Lord, and God. As the writer of Hebrews brings out in chapter 1, verse 5, by asking the question, quote, for which of the angels did God ever say, end quote, concludes that the author here is showing a distinction between the angels and Yeshua. The rest of chapter 1, he continues with the separation and the distinction between Yeshua and the angels, and he concludes with 14 and says, quote, and are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? In the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 12, verse 1 through 11, a parable is given about God sending prophets in his name to go to the children of Israel. But then after, he says, I will send my son. This shows the manifestation of the Messiah being sent by the Father happened after the prophets, and we know the last prophet was Malachi. To also go along with this, there is no mention of Messiah being sent at any other time. There are many mentions of the promised Messiah through the Hebrew scriptures, but none show or hint anything that the Messiah came as an agent. All prophecies about him were talked about him coming into the world and him returning, but nothing before that time. Meaning, when we look at Genesis 3, Daniel 7, and Isaiah 11, all point to prophecies of which he will do when he is on earth for the first time or when he comes back. However, my opponent, like him and many like him, will bring out that there are times that the angel of the Lord receives worship, like in Joshua 5, 13 to 15, and then equivalates that to Yeshua, or that he is some son or the king. He is worthy to receive worship, and he will show other times where angels refuse to receive the worship, like in Revelation 22, 8 through 9. But this is easily explained. If we first look at Chronicles 29:20, we see that David commanded the whole assembly to worship Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh, and puts the text says the whole assembly prostrated themselves before Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh and the king, showing the king, who was Solomon at the time, who we can all agree is a man, receiving the same type of worship as God. So even though both God and Solomon are receiving this worship, we understand that they are not on the same level, and this goes with the understanding of when the angel of the Lord also receives worship. And in this account, when the angel of the Lord doesn't receive worship, we can understand that it is not properly done. And resulting with the idea that the angel of the Lord is either Yeshua or the Father takes away the faith and the loyalty of the angels, especially ones like Michael and Gabriel. Throughout the Hebrew Bible, we see many examples of the loyalty and the faith that the angel showed to the Father. Many examples include standing guard at the entrance of the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve got kicked out, striking down an Assyrian army of 185,000 soldiers, and even rescuing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from a fiery pit. We know that angels are not some robots to do the Father's will because they will have free will. Just as there were some who left their position who had sexual relations with the women on the earth at the time, and a third of them left to join Satan, mentioned in Revelation. We always look to the great patriarchs back in the day like Abel, Abraham, and David, but never acknowledge the faith and loyalty of the angelic creatures. We never take time to appreciate the hard work for Gabriel, giving the word to Daniel, who was even detained by the king of Persia in Daniel chapter 10 for 3 weeks, and Michael had to rescue him, or even give Gabriel good news of Mary and Elizabeth about John and Yeshua. Or what about the appreciation of Michael talking to Joshua as commander of the Lord's army, or being prince who stands watch over God's people? Sorry, something's beeping. Prince who stands over God's people as recorded in Daniel chapter 12, or even his angels battling against Satan and his angels in Revelation 12. But we should condemn the angels who did fall away, like Legion, who is recorded in the Gospels, and Yeshua took him out of the man and put him in the swine of pigs. Legion took his path just as Michael and Gabriel chose theirs. And these are just 3 specific names that are mentioned within the 66 canon Bible. In Revelation, it talks about how there are myriads and myriads of angels, meaning that there are 10,000 of 10,000 or 100 million angels. Well, I don't think that this is supposed to be an exact literal number. It gives us an idea of how many there are. And they all serve a purpose to God, and it's important to give recognition when recognition is due. So in conclusion of the matter, the angel of the Lord is not God himself or Yeshua. The angel of the Lord is a created being brought forth to fulfill divine plans of the Almighty.
And I imagine you yield your last 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Very well. All right. So real quick, I'm sure the audience noticed, Brian hopped out. He was gone for about maybe 30 to 45 seconds. I guess he's having some internet trouble. It was rated about your 3 minute and 30 mark from ending. So Brian, I'm not sure if you need for him to repeat any of his points, or if you're still willing to go forward with the cross-examination.
Yeah, I'm ready to go forward. I mean, because I pretty much understand where he was coming from.
Okay, good to go. As long as everything's good to go, we're good and fair and square. All right, so this next portion is the cross-examination portion. So we will be focusing on three primary questions that each one is going to be allowed to ask. We'll start first with Brian. You'll be allowed 5 minutes to not only ask your question, but also the one giving the answer will be allowed up to 5 minutes to give an answer. The reason in the crowd, for those of you wondering, the reason for allowing 5 minutes to ask a question is that that way the people who are asking a question have a chance to preface any details that their question might hinge on and allow a better understanding of what they're actually trying to ask, instead of just asking a question and then the one answering the question is spending his time seeking that clarity. So each question, you may have up to 5 minutes to ask it if you need that time. If you don't need that time, it's totally fine. I'll have the timer down here. And we will start with Brian. You have the first question. So if everyone's ready to go, I'm going to pull Brian here onto the hot seat, and you may ask your first question.
All right. We'll in Judges chapter 2, and I'll pull it up that way I can look at it, read it off for us. Judges chapter 2, and the angel speaking in Judges to the children of Israel, and he said, let's see if I can find it, add it up. But he actually was saying he was the one that brought the children out of Egypt, and he also said he's the one that made the covenant, and he also claims other things. He spoke to Abraham and stuff like that. And what is in your position that he's an agent? How can this angel make these kind of statements just being a mere creation?
So he can make the statement because just literally, if I'm taking a pen and paper and I said, "Hey, Brian, give this," and I write down my exact words, and you hand this to someone else, you're going to be reading what my words are saying. He is repeating everything that the father has obviously given this agent to give to someone else.
Do you yield the rest of your time to answer that question? I'm sorry. Do you so that's your answer? You yield your full 5 minutes for that answer? Is that correct, Will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you want more clarification or. Yeah.
So I'm going to let this keep going for just a second. So, Brother Brian, you can go ahead and have a follow up to that.
Yeah.
Well, this will not count as your second
question. It's clear that the angel is actually speaking in first person when he says I made the covenant with your fathers. And that's where I was going with that, because it says he was speaking in first person.
All right.
Right.
Will, your response?
My response to that is again, is it he delivering the message, being the father, and he's just a deliverer? Because I think that you and I can both agree that the messenger of the Yad He Vav He wouldn't literally be, how would he still be a messenger delivering that? Isn't he repeating exactly what the father spoke to him to tell his servant? Isn't he acting as the third party to do this?
All right. So that is the first question. Now, Brian, have you prepared a second question? I think you're still muted. And by the way, we can always, we're getting past this for structural purposes. We can revisit these topics during the open discussion portion. So if there's parts of this you guys want to rehash out, we can absolutely go back to that. But yeah, right. So that's the first question. That's the first back and forth for the first question. Actually, you know what? Excuse me. Let me do. So Will, so Brian has asked his first question. Now, Will, I'm going to give you the time to ask your first question. You have 5 minutes to ask it and go.
All right. In Haggai chapter 1, verse 13, it refers to himself as, in the English, messenger of the Lord, but we know in the Hebrew it's literally the exact same thing, Malach Adonai. So in most English, So